What happens when one of Britain's most beloved acting legends loses his temper on live morning television? It only took 30 seconds for Michael Caine to be kicked off the Lorraine Kelly Show after an argument that left viewers absolutely stunned. Before we dive into this shocking confrontation, make sure you subscribe to this channel for daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals. You won't believe what happened next. Last night's episode of the Lorraine Kelly Show started off cheerfully enough. Michael Caine, the legendary actor known for his iconic roles in everything from The Italian Job to the Dark Knight trilogy, settled into the bright sofa across from Lorraine Kelly herself. At 90 years old, Caine has become a national treasure in Britain, beloved by generations of film fans. Morning show appearances with actors of his caliber are usually filled with warm nostalgia, gentle humor, and heartwarming stories from decades in the business. But what began as what should have been a pleasant conversation about his illustrious career quickly transformed into one of the most uncomfortable, heated moments in British daytime television history. What started with smiles and pleasantries descended into shouting, accusations, and ultimately a dramatic ejection from the studio. "Michael, it's absolutely wonderful to have you here." Lorraine began with her signature Scottish warmth and bright smile. "You're looking fantastic, as always. How are you feeling these days? How's life treating you?" Caine smiled, though there was a hint of weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there in years past. "I'm doing all right, Lorraine. You know, at my age, every day you wake up is a good day. Every morning I open my eyes, I consider it a victory." Lorraine laughed warmly. "That's the spirit. Now, I have to say, you've had such an incredible career, spanning over 7 decades. You've worked with everyone from Laurence Olivier to Christopher Nolan. You've been in over 100 films. Looking back on all of that, what stands out most to you? What moments do you treasure?" "Well, I've been very fortunate," Caine said, his distinctive voice filling the studio. "I've worked with some extraordinary people, made some films I'm genuinely proud of. Not all of them were masterpieces, mind you, but I gave each one my best effort. That's all you can do, really." "You're being far too modest," Lorraine insisted, leaning forward with enthusiasm. "You've won 2 Academy Awards. You're a Knight of the British Empire. You're a true icon of cinema, not just here, but around the world. But I want to ask you something that I think a lot of people are curious about. In recent interviews, you've made some comments about modern acting in the film industry today. Some people felt those comments were a bit dismissive of younger actors. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?" Caine's expression shifted slightly, his jaw tightening visibly. "I don't think I was being dismissive at all. I was simply stating facts based on my observations and my experience of working in this industry for 70 years. But you did say that many young actors today don't understand the craft the way your generation did," Lorraine pressed gently but persistently. "You said they rely too much on special effects and multiple takes rather than genuine skill and talent. That's quite a strong statement, isn't it?" "It's an honest statement," Caine replied, his voice getting a bit firmer and more defensive. "When I started out in this business, you had to get it right. You didn't have the luxury of doing 50 takes or fixing everything in post-production with computers and digital effects. You had to know your craft, inside and out. You had to be a real actor." Of course," Lorraine nodded, trying to keep the conversation balanced. "But surely you'd agree that the industry has evolved significantly? That new techniques and technologies have opened up different ways of creating art and telling stories?" "Technology is fine when used properly," Caine said, shifting in his seat uncomfortably. "But it shouldn't replace actual talent and hard work, and I see far too much of that happening today. Young actors who can't do a proper accent to save their lives, can't remember their lines without looking at cue cards, can't work a room or command a scene. They rely on everything being fixed later in editing." Lorraine's smile became a bit more strained. "Michael, I have to push back on that a little. Don't you think that's a rather broad generalization to make? There are incredibly talented young actors working today. Timothée Chalamet, Florence Pugh, John Boyega, Leticia Wright, Paul Mescal. These are phenomenally skilled performers who work incredibly hard. I never said there weren't exceptions to the rule, Caine countered, his voice rising slightly. But they are exceptions, Lorraine. Rare exceptions. Most of what I see today is pretty faces who've had a bit of training at some fancy American acting school and think they know everything about the craft. The atmosphere in the studio shifted noticeably. The crew members exchanged glances. Lorraine sat up straighter. That sounds quite harsh, Michael. These young people are working incredibly hard in a very competitive, very demanding industry. And so did we, Caine shot back immediately. But we didn't complain about it constantly. We didn't expect everything to be handed to us on a silver platter. We worked our way up from absolutely nothing, doing theater in front of hostile audiences, learning our craft the hard way through years of struggle. Times have changed, though, Lorraine said, her tone getting more defensive. The industry is fundamentally different now. The pressures are different. Young actors today deal with social media scrutiny, 24 hours a day, online harassment, impossible beauty standards, constant comparison. Oh, here we go, Caine interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. The victim mentality that pervades everything these days. Everyone's a victim of something. In my day, if you couldn't handle criticism, if you couldn't handle the pressure, you got out of the business. Simple as that. Nobody forced you to be an actor. Lorraine's eyes widened in surprise and concern. Michael, that's quite unfair to say. Mental health is incredibly important. The pressures these young people face are very real and can be absolutely devastating. Mental health, Caine scoffed loudly, his disdain evident. That's become the convenient excuse for absolutely everything these days, hasn't it? Can't handle a bad review? Mental health. Don't want to work hard? Mental health. Don't want to show up on time? Mental health. I'm sorry, Lorraine, but when I was coming up in this business, we just got on with it. We didn't have time for all this nonsense. That's incredibly dismissive, Lorraine said, her voice getting sharper and more passionate. Are you seriously suggesting that mental health issues aren't real or important? That depression and anxiety are just excuses? I'm saying people are too bloody soft now, Caine replied firmly, his voice rising. Everyone needs constant validation and coddling. We've created a generation of actors that can't handle any adversity whatsoever. They fall apart at the slightest criticism. Lorraine leaned forward, her Scottish accent getting more pronounced as her frustration grew. Michael, I really have to strongly disagree with you on this. What you're describing sounds like a fundamental lack of empathy for genuine struggles that people face every single day. Depression, anxiety, trauma, PTSD, these are real medical conditions, not character flaws. And they're overdiagnosed and overused as convenient excuses, Caine insisted, his voice getting even louder. Half the people claiming to have anxiety or depression just need to toughen up and get on with their lives instead of wallowing in self-pity. The studio crew exchanged deeply uncomfortable glances. Several people's mouths dropped open. Lorraine's face flushed bright red with anger. I cannot believe you just said that on my show. Do you have any idea how incredibly harmful that kind of attitude is? How many people you could hurt with words like that? It's the truth, Caine said stubbornly. Whether you like it or not, it's not the truth. It's your opinion, Lorraine countered sharply. And it's a damaging opinion that could hurt people who are genuinely struggling. If people are that fragile that they're hurt by an old man stating his opinion on television, then they've proven my point exactly, Caine said, crossing his arms defensively. Lorraine took a deep breath, clearly trying hard to compose herself and not completely lose her temper on live television. Michael, I've always respected you tremendously as an actor. I've admired your work for decades. Your performances in Alfie, in Educating Rita, in The Cider House Rules, they're masterful. But right now, in this moment, I'm finding it very difficult to respect what you're saying. You're being incredibly insensitive to people who are genuinely suffering, and you're being incredibly naive about the real world and how it actually works. Caine fired back without hesitation. You want to coddle everyone and tell them they're special and wonderful, when the reality is that half of them shouldn't even be in this business in the first place. Not everyone has what it takes, and that's perfectly fine. They should find something else to do. That's enough, Lorraine said firmly, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. You can't come on my show and talk like this. You absolutely cannot dismiss an entire generation of hardworking, dedicated people and mock serious mental health issues that destroy lives. I'm not mocking anything, Caine protested loudly. I'm speaking from 7 full-priced decades of experience in this industry. 70 years. I've earned the right to have an opinion about how things have changed, haven't I? Or am I not allowed to speak my mind anymore? Having an opinion is one thing, Lorraine said, her voice rising considerably now. Being cruel and dismissive and potentially causing genuine harm is another thing entirely. What you're saying right now, the attitudes you're expressing, could genuinely hurt vulnerable people who are watching this program. Oh, for God's sake, Caine said, throwing his hands up. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't say anything anymore without someone being offended. Everyone's so sensitive, so ready to be hurt by words. Words matter, Michael, Lorraine said passionately, leaning forward. What you say on a platform like this, with thousands of people watching, matters enormously. And right now, you're using that platform to spread really damaging, harmful views about mental health and young people who are struggling. Damaging views, Caine repeated mockingly, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Everything's damaging now, isn't it? Everything's problematic. Everything's offensive. You can't speak your mind freely without being accused of causing harm to someone, somewhere. When your mind is full of outdated, insensitive attitudes that could genuinely hurt people, maybe you shouldn't speak it so freely on national television. Lorraine shot back sharply. Caine's face went bright red with anger. Are you calling me outdated? Are you seriously sitting there, half my age, with half my experience, telling me that I'm outdated and don't know what I'm talking about? I'm saying your views on this particular subject are outdated and potentially harmful, Lorraine clarified firmly. The world has moved on from the stiff upper lip mentality, Michael. We understand mental health so much better now than we did 50 years ago. We understand the importance of empathy, support, professional help. What you call empathy and support, I call weakness and dependency, Caine said coldly, his eyes hard. You're creating a society of people who can't cope with the slightest difficulty, who fall apart at the first sign of trouble. Lorraine stood up suddenly, her chair scraping back. Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. I will absolutely not sit here and let you continue to spread this kind of dangerous rhetoric on my show. Mental health issues are real medical conditions. Young people today are not weak for acknowledging them and seeking help. Caine stood up as well, matching her posture aggressively. And I will not sit here and be lectured by someone who doesn't have the faintest understanding of what it actually took to build a real career in this industry. Your generation, these young people today, they want all the rewards with none of the sacrifice, none of the hard work. My generation, Lorraine's voice rose sharply, her Scottish accent becoming even more pronounced. Michael, you're talking about people who are in their 20s and 30s. I'm 53 years old. I've been working in television broadcasting for over 30 years. Don't you dare suggest I haven't sacrificed or worked hard to get where I am. Then you should know better, Caine said, not backing down an inch. You should understand from your own experience that coddling people doesn't help them grow. It weakens them. It makes them dependent. Supporting people through difficult times isn't coddling, Lorraine countered firmly. It's basic human decency. It's compassion, something you seem to have completely forgotten in your old age. How dare you? Caine's voice shook with genuine anger. How dare you speak to me like that? I've given more to this industry, sacrificed more than you could ever possibly imagine. I've worked when I was sick, when I was grieving, when I could barely stand up. I didn't make excuses. I didn't cry about it on social media. And that's admirable in its own way, Lorraine said, trying to maintain some composure. But it doesn't mean everyone else has to suffer in complete silence the way you did. We can do better than that. We should do better. We have the knowledge and resources now to support people properly. Better, Caine scoffed loudly. You think giving out participation trophies and constant unearned praise make things better? You're creating a generation of entitled brats who think they deserve success without putting in the work. Entitled brats? Lorraine's voice cracked with a mixture of anger and disbelief. These are people dealing with very real struggles in an increasingly difficult world. Housing crises, economic uncertainty, climate anxiety, political turmoil, a global pandemic. Excuses, 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 Caine interrupted dismissively. Every generation has faced enormous challenges. We didn't sit around complaining about it endlessly on social media platforms. Because you didn't have social media, Lorraine pointed out sharply. And if you had, I'm quite sure your generation would have used it exactly the same way young people do today. Excuses, 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 Caine interrupted dismissively, waving his hand. Every single generation has faced enormous challenges. Massive challenges. We didn't sit around complaining about it endlessly on social media platforms, writing long posts about our feelings. Because you didn't have social media, Lorraine pointed out sharply. And if you had, I'm quite sure your generation would have used it exactly the same way young people do today. Human nature doesn't change that much. To work and communicate, not to whine and complain, Caine insisted stubbornly. You're being deliberately obtuse, Lorraine said, her frustration boiling over visibly. You're refusing to acknowledge that the world has fundamentally changed, that we understand human psychology so much better now, that we know it's okay and healthy to ask for help when you need it. The world hasn't changed that much at its core, Caine argued. People are still people. Work is still work. Life is still hard. If you can't handle the pressure, if you can't cope with the demands, find another profession. Nobody's forcing anyone to be an actor. Lorraine shook her head in complete disbelief. I cannot believe what I'm hearing from you. This is not the Michael Caine I thought I knew. This is not the person I admired. This is someone who's become bitter and completely out of touch with reality. Out of touch? Caine's voice rose to near shouting levels. I'm the only one here speaking any common sense. You're all so caught up in this modern nonsense, this culture of victimhood, that you can't see you're destroying people's ability to cope with real life. We're trying to support people, Lorraine shouted back, her voice matching his volume. We're trying to create a world where people don't have to suffer completely alone, where it's okay to not be okay. You're creating a world of weakness and dependency, Caine yelled back. The studio went completely, utterly silent. The crew stood frozen in place. Even the cameras seemed to shake slightly from the intensity of the confrontation. Lorraine's voice became dangerously quiet, which was somehow more frightening than the shouting. Michael, I think you need to leave my show. What? Caine looked genuinely shocked and caught off guard. I'm asking you to leave my show, Lorraine repeated firmly, her voice steady despite her obvious emotion. Right now, I cannot and will not provide a platform for these harmful views. What you're saying could genuinely damage people, and I won't be party to spreading it. You're kicking me off? Caine's voice dripped with disbelief and indignation. For having an honest opinion? For speaking my mind? For being cruel and dismissive about serious issues that affect millions and millions of people, Lorraine clarified. For mocking mental health struggles, for insulting an entire generation of young people who are working incredibly hard in impossible circumstances. This is absurd, Caine said, pulling off his microphone with sharp, angry movements. Absolutely absurd. You invite me here, you ask me provocative questions designed to get a reaction, and then you kick me off when you don't like my honest answers? I invited you here for a civilized conversation, Lorraine said, her voice shaking with emotion, not to watch you attack vulnerable people and spread dangerous, outdated attitudes about mental health that could harm viewers. Dangerous, Caine laughed bitterly, shaking his head. The only thing that's dangerous is raising an entire generation that can't handle any criticism or hardship without falling apart. That's what's truly dangerous for society. Get out, Lorraine said, pointing firmly toward the exit. I mean it, Michael. Get off my show right now. I will not tolerate this. Gladly, Caine said, tossing his microphone onto the chair with force. I wouldn't want to corrupt your precious safe space with actual honesty and real-world perspective. Honesty and cruelty aren't the same thing, Lorraine called after him, her voice cracking. Neither are coddling and kindness, Caine shot back, without turning around. He turned and walked toward the exit with deliberate, angry steps, his posture rigid with indignation and fury. The crew members quickly parted to let him through, their faces showing a mixture of shock, discomfort, and sympathy. Some looked at Lorraine, some looked at Michael, and some just looked at the floor, not wanting to be part of this moment. Lorraine remained standing, her chest heaving, her face flushed with anger and emotion. Her hands were shaking visibly at her sides. I'm sorry you all had to witness that, Lorraine said to the audience and cameras, her voice unsteady. But I will not allow my show to be used as a platform for views that could genuinely hurt people who are struggling with mental health issues. Mental health matters. It's real. Empathy matters. Support matters. And if that makes me too soft or too sensitive in some people's eyes, then so be it. I'd rather be too kind than too cruel. The sound of a heavy door slamming echoed through the studio like a gunshot as Michael Caine left the building. The bang made everyone in the studio jump, and the finality of it hung in the air like smoke. Lorraine sat back down slowly, visibly trying to compose herself and regain some semblance of control. Her hands were still shaking slightly as she reached for her glass of water with both hands to steady it. We're going to take a short break, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. When we come back, we'll be talking about mental health resources and support systems available to anyone who needs them, because that conversation is important, and it matters more than ever. The cameras stayed on her for a few extra seconds, capturing the raw aftermath of what had just occurred. One of Britain's most beloved and respected actors had just been kicked off a morning talk show for his controversial, harmful views about mental health in young people, leaving behind a studio full of stunned crew members, a shaken host, and an audience still processing what they'd just witnessed in real time. What should have been a pleasant, nostalgic trip down memory lane with a legendary actor celebrating 7 decades in the business had instead become a fierce, heated debate about generational differences, mental health awareness, empathy, and the rapidly changing values of modern society. And it had ended with raised voices, harsh accusations, and a dramatic exit that nobody in that studio would soon forget. What should have been a pleasant, nostalgic trip down memory lane with a legendary actor celebrating 7 decades in the business had instead become a fierce, heated debate about generational differences, mental health awareness, empathy, and the rapidly changing values of modern society. And it had ended with raised voices, harsh accusations, and a dramatic exit that nobody in that studio would soon forget. The crew stood in stunned silence, still processing the explosive confrontation they had just witnessed unfold before their eyes. The production assistant approached Lorraine hesitantly. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Lorraine nodded, though tears of frustration welled in her eyes. I can't believe that happened. I can't believe he said those things." She paused, collecting herself. "But I'm glad I stood up to him. Someone had to." The assistant squeezed her shoulder gently. "You did the right thing. You absolutely did the right thing." As the commercial break ended and the show resumed, Lorraine's voice was stronger, more determined. She spoke directly to anyone watching who might be struggling. If you're dealing with mental health issues, please know that you're not weak. You're not making excuses. You deserve support. You deserve help, and you deserve compassion. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Her words hung in the air, a direct counter to everything Michael Caine had said just minutes before. It was a powerful moment, a reclaiming of the narrative, a refusal to let harmful attitudes go unchallenged. The morning show had turned into something much bigger, a statement about values, about empathy, about standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means challenging a legend. Outside the studio, Michael Caine climbed into his waiting car without a word to the driver. His jaw was set, his face still flushed. He stared out the window as the car pulled away, perhaps replaying the confrontation in his mind, perhaps already dismissing it entirely. But one thing was certain: the damage was done. The words had been said, the confrontation had been broadcast, and neither Michael Caine nor Lorraine Kelly would ever forget this morning.